Now, today we will add to the communion experience with the addition of taking a few moments to prepare our hearts and minds for sacred instruction. Now, this portion requires the use of one gold raw candle and or one white nectar candle and quality frankincense, which is called seneter in the Kemetic tradition, which translates as divine fragrance. If you don't have these things, it's also fine. You can still gain value from this process nevertheless. So let us begin. Now, as you light your candles and your incense, take a few moments and allow the spirit of quietude to alight upon you. And then sooner before later, you'll notice that something as unassuming as lighting a candle and burning incense can make you instantly and automatically relax. Relaxation leads to your peace. Your peace opens the way to your power. And as you sit with an aura of calmness and contemplate the energy of the day, with every inhalation and exhalation, all static energy, stagnant energy, and negative energy gets pushed outwards and away until only you remain, perfectly centered and calm, like the black dot in the center of the circle, or the symbol of Ra. Now, after your next few breaths, you'll be ready to emerge, relaxed, refreshed, and renewed, and fully capable of grasping the lessons and the layers of today's sacred instruction. Amen. Ma'at. Iyiti, and welcome to the Communion Experience. Once again, this is your host and the Sip Biddy, Ra Sanku Kepper, Chief and Head Priest of the Templeofanu, facilitating our bi-weekly discussions about how to walk in peace and power by way of the teachings of the ancient Kemetic legacy. So let us get into what we call the word of the day. Now, the word of the day is when we take one word from the ancient hieroglyphic language called Sesh Medu Neter, which are the divine written words, or Jed Medu, spoken words, or words that tell. So we start off by giving a basic cultural foundation to the understanding of the word, and then we build on it with metaphysical and spiritual import as to its relevance to our current lives and circumstances. So let us get into it. The word of the day is Derep. Derep is the word of the day, and that is spelled D-E-R-E-P. Now, it is a word that consists of several glyphs. The first one being that of a hand, and it represents the letter D and the sound value of Da or Di. The second symbol is that of a mouth, and you may be familiar with this from former communions, and it represents the letter R and the sound value of Ra or Re or Yira or Yire. The next symbol is that of a stool or stand, and it represents the letter P with the sound value of Pe or Pa. And lastly, you have the determinative, which helps you define and interpret the word, and is that of a flask pouring water, because the word Derep means to pour libation. It is the ancestor or probably the predecessor of the word drip, which is to literally pour libation. In this sense, it's pour libation to the ancestors or the divinities. So let us get into it a little further. So we go back to the top to D, the hand. Hands in Kemetic symbology represents the action of giving. All ancient people built everything with their hands, so the hands were very sacred. So to give somebody something means that it was infused with energy and it came from a very personal place. So when you see hands or arms offering something, like you'll see an arm extended offering what looks like a pyramid, but that is actually a loaf of bread shaped in the form of a pyramid. So giving and offering is a sacred thing. So when you see hands or arms, they represent to give and offering. The next symbol is that of the mouth. And we went into this in great detail in the form of communion about the mouth. The mouth, the letter R, actually represents the word to do or to take action. And we spoke in detail about this when we went to the book of knowing the creations of Ra and overcoming Apep or evil, where the creator speaks it and says, when I came into existence, existence itself came into existence. Many were the beings that came forth from my mouth. Now, these beings could be called gods. Many were the gods that came forth from my mouth. Many were the Neteru that came forth from my mouth. Or many were the forces of nature that came forth from my mouth. And a lot of times in African traditions, everything is multi-layered. So you could address this just as a text, a philosophy. You could address it as theology. You could address it as mythology, or you could even address it as science, whatever your proclivity is when it comes to interpreting text. Now, the mouth is also symbolic of making things happen or causing things to happen, as in heka or hekau, which translates as words of power, or some people say mantras. So hekau or heka, or the possessor of heka or hekau, is a person who is said to have great secum or personal power. So when that person speaks, they have the ability or the power to influence people as well as deities, ancestors, and beings to quote make things happen. So Heka could be translated as the power of influence. And lastly, you have the stool again, or the pedestal, which implies to sit or take a rest, or to take up a place to sit and rest. To do what? It is to place the attention of the act of giving, as in D, giving honor to, or how, by way of the mouth, by voice offerings and pouring water. So take time or take space to rest in your consciousness and give an offering of words as well as water. And these words and these water were combined with a text or a protocol called the Hotep di Nasut, which is the royal offering. And it was a formula that dates back way back to the Old Kingdom, and is pretty much the process of informing you how to do a Kemetic libation ceremony. So there you have it, is the word of the day, and Derep, which is the pour libation. So we leave you with a quote from the book of Ani. It says, pour libation for your father and your mother, who rest in the valley of the deceased. Neter will witness your action and accept it. Do not forget to do this even when you're away from home, for as you do for your parents, your children will do for you also. Yiti, and welcome back. So let us have a follow-up discussion from our last communion about wet Renpet. And it was called, I think it was called, What, Another New Year? And let us have some follow-up insights about it, some practical insights about what can we do, or what are we going to do about this information about wet Renpet. So just to summarize what we discussed last time, wet Renpet in ancient times was something that was signified by the sighting of the star Sirius, or Spadet, or Sepdet, or some says Sapdu, on the horizon with the sun, along with the flooding of the Hopi River. All of this happened within within the lunar month called Wet Renpet on the calendar. When those things happened simultaneously together, that was called Tepi Renpet, meaning the top of the year. So that signified the beginning of the year. Now, in ancient times, Wet Renpet was celebrated by having 700,000 pilgrims migrate to celebrate the holiday. What does that mean, pilgrims? It means to come from your settlement to come to a certain location to observe this event or this holiday. What does that mean for us? That means that Wet Renpet was on the same level of significance as Hajj was for the Muslim, or Hajj is for the Muslims. And those who don't know what Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of faith for the Muslim, where at least once in your life, the adherent has to go to Mecca to make Hajj, which is to go to Mecca and circumambulate around the Kaaba and do other ceremonial things within that tradition. It is also equivalent to where Jews all over the planet, they go to Israel to visit what's known as the Wailing Wall, when they do their prayers to Adonai at the Wailing Wall. It also is equivalent to Kumbh Mela of the Hindus, where every 4 years adherents come to do this ceremony, which is a great purification ceremony, and it draws 400 million people. The Hajj to Mecca draws 2.3 million people every year. I don't know how much the Wailing Wall draws, but many traditions have these traditions that pull hundreds and thousands of people to participate in these rites. So now in ancient times, of course, they didn't have millions and millions upon people upon the planet. So there would be no ceremony in ancient Kemet that would draw 400 million like the Hindus. It just wasn't that many people on the planet at that time. So 700,000 is nothing to sneeze at also. So Wet Renpet also is equivalent to and transcends the significance of even the Western New Year. So on Wet Renpet is a time for prayers and reflection of what was known as the Tepi, Heriu, Renpet, the 5 deities over the year. As we explained, the Kemites had 3 calendars: a solar calendar, a lunar calendar, and a civic calendar. They calculated that there were 360 days in a year with 5 intercalary days, or 5 days over the year. Now, that mythology that surrounds that is very complex, and it exceeds the scope of this platform, because that discussion is really actually for initiates in the inner precincts of the temple, meaning inner conversations with initiates amongst other initiates. The scope of a platform like this is to discover and discuss its relevance, or how we can apply those things to our current lives. So let us proceed. We also have to realize, with the advent of the internet, like 30 years ago, came the advent of what I call cultural voyeurism. In short, voyeurism is when someone tries to extract value or pleasure by watching other people indulge in things that they extract value and pleasure from. So you're watching on the screen, you're watching on your phone or whatever. For instance, if we say, come join us for Wet Renpet, while 700,000 people would come from their different locations to do that. In this day and time, people are asked, where's the link? Can you send me the link? They have no intentions on actually going, or they play like they want to come, but they're not always necessarily seriously going to come or consider. And they ask for the link, or they get on YouTube the next day to see if anyone posts their footage of it, and they were like, oh, that's lit, I should have went, or is barely anyone there. I don't know if I'm ever going to go, because it doesn't look like no one goes, without realizing that you were some of the bodies that were supposed to be there. So here we have all religions, as well as ATR or any spiritual organizations, are faced with this new challenge of not getting new converts, but keeping the ones that you have engaged and committed. So now, Wet Renpet, the celebration of it, you may see certain people observe it at different times. Some people observe it in September, some observe it in August, some observe it in July. And that depends on people's research. Some people's research are based off of the sighting of the star Spadet in the sky, and it happens in the last week of July if you were over in Kemet, and it comes in the scene over here in the States around August. And some base it off of the Coptic calendar, because they were said to be the keepers of the ancient Kemetic calendar. And there's an upside to all of this, is because if we all did it at the same time in our different locations, none of us Kemites would really all meet together, because we'll all be in our distinct locations. But now it's almost like there's an opportunity that since it's staggered, we could all support each other and see our different various expressions and come together and appreciate the different various expressions of how we pay tribute to these Netaru. For instance, generally we host the wet Renpet, but we didn't host it publicly this year. So I received a call from Abut Simsut from the Shrine of Best that is located in California. Because she had previously came to several of our wet Renpets, and she called and asked where was it at, and I said, unfortunately, we're not doing it publicly. And she's like, what you mean you're not doing it publicly? So she put pressure on me, like, where's it at? And I was like, well, we're doing it private. She's like, and where's it at? And I said, unfortunately, it's a private circumstance or situation. So she had planned on coming to the East Coast to celebrate with us. So therefore, there was no plans on the West Coast to do wet Renpet because she was coming to celebrate it over here with us. So we agreed to do meet online. So let me tell you just background on Abut Simsut. She's one of the founders of Kera Best, or the Shrine of Best. Shrine of Best has its origins either in Harlem or maybe Brooklyn, New Jersey. And she's founded that temple with Abdel Salim. And it is the house of, I don't know if you all heard of Forces of Nature. It's a dance company. And if you ever seen Alvin Ailey's dance company and how beautiful their presentations are, Forces of Nature are that through an African lens. And when you see them, you'll agree that they are truly the personification of grace and creativity, which makes sense on why Best, which is the nectar of the creative arts as well as a protective deity along with Heru, is their governing deity of their temple or their shrine. And then, which is interesting how things come full circle. I remember Abut Simset way back in the day when I was like 21 years old studying Kupagani and Gumi, African martial arts, under my teacher, Hemfadisi Jahuti Hassan Salim L. That was back when they were in Harlem. It was in the basement of some church, I think, and it was the home for Forces of Nature, but they were subleasing it to Infidisi. So we were doing Kupagani and Gumi, and they would interact with us sometime. And I remember Abut Simsut, she's a beautiful dark-skinned sister with long locks almost to the floor. And they used to do the martial arts with us periodically from now and then. But their level of creativity to see them do our martial arts, they took it to another level because they've mastered dance and they mastered movement, and all martial arts in African martial arts based off movement and rhythm, and they master movement and rhythm. So they took our art to a whole nother level. And it's just interesting. Here we are 30 years later. Now we're colleagues. And I'm just like, wow, I'm getting old, but that's a beautiful circle of life. So I received the call from Simsut. So we agreed to do it online. And she co-facilitated it with Abut Anuket, which is from the House of Neat in Arizona. Now, I don't know much about the House of Neat in Arizona, but her and Simsut is very good friends, and they go way back, and they're both thorough from my experience with talking and speaking and interacting with both of them. So they did this ceremony online, which I share my experience with, and it was very pleasing because they were so thorough through and through that it relaxed my ego. What do I mean by that? It relaxed my ego, meaning I didn't feel the need to add one jot or one tittle to it. It was just perfect. They were just through and through. And it made me realize and appreciate that us as Kemites, we need to just get together for the sake of just getting together for ourselves, because contrary to proper belief, we don't just spend all our time trying to figure out how to teach the masses, or solely just how to teach the masses. And there's something healing when we all get together and just share our insights, because we spend a lot of our time respectfully dumbing down our content in order to just make sure other people understand what it is that we're trying to say. But when we get amongst each other, we could just share. It kind of reminds me of the Big Bang concept, when science teaches that at the beginning was a Big Bang and the universe expanded, and at one point in time the universe is going to contract itself. And this is where all of the world's mythology get its judgment day. So remember said that we're the creator, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, or the creator expanded itself, and then it's going to retract itself to pull back all of the experiences that have experienced through us to see what's useful and not what's not useful. So kind of that's how we were as Kemetic priests. We went out to the world to set the world on fire with our teachings. And sometimes when we come back together, we want to share, or we need to share at least, what it is that we learned about ourselves in the process. The second thing that stood out to me about the wet Renpet, because remember, this is all about cultivation, cultivating the inner divinities to correspond to the outer divinities. That's when you do those two things, that is the manifestation of power. So what I noticed about the two sisters, they were just very thorough, and they're teachers after my own heart. So when I listened to them teach, it reminded me of myself and how and why I evolved the way that I evolved. What do I mean by that? So these sisters, they have a no nonsense approach to teaching, and their pressure, their style is pressure. So they actually ask more questions than teaching, because they know who they are and they have nothing to prove to themselves. So therefore they know what they laid down. So they're asking questions. And sometimes that could be seen as mean or a little too harsh. And like I said, it just reminded me of how or why I evolved the way that I evolved now. Because I've noticed in the past 3 years or so, my teaching style has tended to rub certain people the wrong way. They think I'm kind of brash or maybe harsh. But when I see the elders, it makes sense, because now I'm a young elder. I'm in another level of my life, and time is of essence, and we don't play. So let us, before we get into it, let us give the stance and status of elders in the African tradition. So let us start with the book of Ani. Now, according to Ani, how you're supposed to conduct yourself with elders. It says, answer not the elders who are angry. Let them have their way. Speak sweetly when they speak bitterly, for it is a remedy that soothes the heart. Contentious answers provoke strife, and eventually your will be broken. Let not your heart be troubled, for they will soon return to praise you when their hour of rage has passed. When your words please the heart is inclined to accept them. Seek self-mastery, then, and your self-mastery will subdue them. Okay, that's an interesting quote. I know some people may think, well, I don't know, Nasid, it seems like that's giving the elders a pass on how to talk reckless or talk crazy. I can't have people talking crazy to me. So let us understand not just the content, but the context of the context. So we're talking about elders, not olders, not people that are just older. We're talking about elders. So when we're looking at a quote like this, we're talking about an elder in a traditional society, as well as students in a traditional society. So there is no imbalance in it. So in traditional societies, elders speak in parables, elders speak in metaphors. The students learn in parables, the students learn in metaphors. Drumming is a parable of metaphor. Dancing is a parable and metaphor. Clothing and combinations of clothes and beads, everything is telling a story or a metaphor. So when you have a student that may be a fifth year student of a elder or a teacher, and they're asking first year questions, the elder's going to get you together, and it might not be so nice. Those things like that agitates the elders, because the elder could be frustrated, like, why does this student not understand nuance yet? Because that's what parables do. So in the traditions, elders don't prove anything. Logic is not the language of spirit. Metaphor is the language of spirit. The things that cause things to happen in the world through symbols, through belief, through emotions, and through action. These are how things come into the world, and not necessarily scientific facts that you read on paper. Understand that. We're going to revisit that. So an elder get you together if you're a fifth year student asking first year student questions. But to be fair for the student actually likes and they adores seeing and hearing the elders when they're in their bag and in their lane, and they're going in and they're just soaking it up, and they're looking at the elder like, wow, that's how I want to be when I grow up, metaphorically. And now from the elders' point of view, we're breaking things down in a Nobel Peace Prize winning, Pulitzer Prize or winning way of bringing things into bringing teachings or expounding teachings in a way that has never been expounded before. And it's looking like it's going over the student's head, and it's not, the seed is not being planted in their mind and growing their spirit. So, and vice versa, when the teachers want to see themselves reflected in the student also. And it reminds me of the meme when you talk about like firm teaching styles. It reminds me of the meme that I've seen online where you have a cocoon sitting at a table talking to a butterfly, and the cocoon says, "You've changed." And the butterfly says, "I know, I was supposed to. Why haven't you?" Or some variation of that. So the cocoon not realizing that the butterfly is the inevitable evolution of himself. So I'm going to follow with another alternate translation from Ani. And it says, "Answer not elders who are angry. Let them have their way, for cold-eyed they have surveyed the world. Listen and learn from them, for even in a question answers appear. Speak calmly where they speak bitterly. Treat them as you would have them treat you. Make their past serve your present and your future." And that's powerful. So elders always admonish us to understand nuance. With that being said, I also spoke of Abud Anuket, and she admonished us about intellectual masturbation. And sometimes within our culture, we have this obsession to just constantly do cross-cultural comparisons, whether it's through other cultures of the world or even through other African cultures. So the lesson is there is no shortage of knowledge in the world. Right now, the people are the smartest as they ever been in the history of humankind. You could learn everything that ever was taught just by the way of the internet and chat GPT. But unfortunately, as smart as the world is, all this technology that the world has not necessarily produced better people. So people got it confused, thinking just knowledge and attaining knowledge is going to make you a better person. No. So now we even have like echo chambers, and people look like, well, Sheikh Anta Diop wouldn't agree with this, or this doesn't agree with the teachings of Sheikh Anta Diop, or this doesn't agree with the teachings of Dr. Ben, or Dr. Ben wouldn't agree with this and that. Those are echo chambers, and respectfully, those elders or those elders are now ancestors, and they had a lane and they set a foundation, and is now in this world. Since then, many of us, or many bold individuals, have been bold enough, or maybe foolish enough, to try some of the things that they've been exposed to. And now, this day and time, there's different trajectories of information and experience that respectfully those elders who are now ancestors wouldn't have been qualified to have this conversation, because that was not their wheelhouse. Their wheelhouse was scholarship. Now, in the day and time we're living in now, some of our wheelhouses is spirituality and experience, the experience and the inexperience of the spirituality that come from these practices that we've been exposed to. So with that, she spoke about this spirit of gathering, meaning people just getting information just for the sake of getting information. And so that's a warning against hoarding. So there's gathering, well, this is cool, get the information, but then there's hoarding. Hoarding is, like, y'all seen that show back in the day on cable TV, it was called Hoarders, and they'll visit people different places in the States, and they'll go to their storage lockers, and it's full with alleged junk. Their apartments are full of junk, their homes are full of junk. When you're looking at it, it's 1,001 things. It's not necessarily junk, it's things that are useful or could be useful to 1,001 people except themselves. So if it's good for 1,001 people except themselves, then that's when your gathering turns into a hoarding, and it's no longer beneficial to you. So the lesson from the elders that I got is, we're living in a world where we're met with so much disbelief. The disbelief is up front, and that it takes so much time to convert from disbelief to belief, and it makes our growth take that much longer. And our ancestors were aware of this. That's why they said the initiation process took 30 to 35 years. So clearly they were dealing with it back in ancient Kemet time. So people think they're going to get through 35 years worth of information in 1 or 2 years, and it doesn't work like that. So there's a process from disbelief to belief. Now, belief is not truth. Belief is just mental acceptance of what was taught. And that's a process to go from belief to mental acceptance of what has been taught. And then that goes into insperience. An insperience is an internal shift, change, or transformation in perspective. Then comes the experience, when you try to share the results of your shifted, changed, and transformed perspective with others, and which is also often anecdotal, meaning it becomes your personal experience that could defy scientific fact or what other people say through certain process of how they come up with truth. And sometimes your personal truth could contradict the results of their truth. It doesn't mean your truth is more true than theirs. It's just sometimes you're the exception to the rule. But that's what experience is. So you share your experience because now you're in knowing, you're aware of what it is that you were believing in, which eventually comes to being. Being is when you don't care whether people believe it or not. You don't care to share it, or you're just indifferent whether you share it or not. You're just being, and it doesn't matter. And you kind of like achieve a state of unbotheredness. For instance, people could ask, what is that fragrance that you're wearing? And you're just like, I don't know. It could be a combination between the soap that I bathe with, the shea butter that I put on, and in the oils that I put in the hair. So it creates this new thing, and that's just what it smells like. I didn't wear it to impress you. They be like, well, what clothes are you wearing? And they're waiting for some fancy designer, and you just wear what resonates with you. And because you will understand that the clothes don't make you, you make the clothes. And then they're like, what music was that you listening to? You pulled up in your car that you was jamming to. And is the Africans, we learn through osmosis. So you see people that you respect and you watch what it is that they do that brings them joy. Then you sometimes possibly partake in it too, to see what is it that they're getting from it. And that's how you kind of relate with that elder or that person. No one's like, if you remember when we were young, no one sat you down to listen to music. Music was this thing that was playing in the background that we watched our parents and our elders and our aunts and uncles dance to and put them in the vibe, and we were just taking it all in, osmosis. No one sat down and said, listen, son, this is James Brown and this is the funk. You see, you listen to who he's talking to, that's Bobby Bluebird. And we didn't learn about James Brown that way. No one sat us down and said, listen, daughter, this is KRS-One and this is Boom Bat. And he's relating to, and he's talking about D Nice. That's just not how it is. It's just like you just do things that pleases your soul. And when people are around, you have conversations about the things that's going on. That's through osmosis. That's when you get to a level of being. You're not doing it for others. You're doing it to flower your spirit, and it draws the attention. The point is, you teach others more by your actions than by your words. So let's bring it out to a close with our conversation with Wet Renpet. Remember, Wet Renpet is based off of the inundation of the Hopi River. So the Hopi no longer floods, but there's a heavenly Hopi that floods or inundates this spiritual plane. And it starts way back at the summer solstice in June, at least for us over here in the Western Hemisphere. So there's high energies coming to the earth during the summer solstice in June. Then we have Wet Renpet that comes from July into August. And then it concludes with the Lion Gate portal energies, which is supposed to be a flooding of energies from Sirius or Spadet that concluded this year on August 8th. So that's a lot of energies flooding the plane. So our ancestors always prepared for the flood. They looked forward to that flood. They saw the flood as a way to channel the energies that they could channel for not just spiritual success, but financial success. So are we prepared, or are you prepared? All of you Kemites out there, are you prepared? Do you know when Wet Renpet is coming? It should not ever get past you. You should not get through the summer and not ask, when is Wet Renpet? When are we going to do it? Who's holding it? And things like that. Are you prepared like the ancestors were prepared? Are you prepared for the spiritual flood? Look at that metaphor, the spiritual flood. Those of us that own homes or apartments over here in the Western Hemisphere. We spoke last time, I said before, a couple of weeks before wet Renpet, a literal flood came through my part of New Jersey. It was like 4 feet high and it caused a lot of damage. So people that own homes and things like that, they would need to have, it would be in their best interest to have a pump in their basement to pump out excess water as not to damage the structure or the foundation of the house, and as well as have flood insurance, which could cover the cost of the damages that may happen just in case your pump can't flush out all the excess water. So there's a metaphor in all of that. So do you have the capacity to pump out excess energies that may be coming from your life already, as well as these energies from Sirius, as well as the solstice energy? Do you have enough to filter out what's useful? Because contrary to popular opinion, you don't have to know everything about everything. All you need to do is know everything you need to know about how to become the best and most complete version of yourself, because that is the thing that's going to change the world. Not what you say, not even what you teach, but you teach and you say and you speak louder through your actions than your words. And your spiritual insurance is your priests and your elders in your spiritual community who has the skill set to possibly offset your inability to filter out the excess energies that may be coming or flooding in through the universe or the cosmos. So with that being said, I want to close out the lesson and say by saying, I hope you appreciate how we streamline these Kemetic teachings on how to be Kemetic in the 21st century, and that I appreciate all the contributions and the teachings of all the teachers and the elders and who are now ancestors before me, as well as my contemporaries, that we're not in competition with anyone but the oldest versions of ourselves. And if we all keep that in mind, then we'll all end up in a better place than we started. So with that, I'll just say, if you've been inclined to want to support us with a donation, we appreciate that. You could Cash App Templeofanu or PayPal Templeofanu. If not, you don't like that form, just visit our website and hopefully you will want to support by purchasing one of our spiritual items that may help you in your spiritual journey. So until next time, I leave by saying Di Anu, Uncle Jocelyn and Shimmy Matep.